So when we talk about labor market, we're simply talking about a place of contact between the demand for and the supply of labor. So when we talk about demand for labor, it's simply talking about the numbers of workers firms are willing to employ at a given wage rate. That is demand for labor. Then the supply of labor is the total number of workers that are making themselves available for a job. So the point of contact between those who are willing to give a job and those who want to find a job is called the labor market. So we're going to start with the demand for labor. What is demand for labor? Demand for labor is the number of workers that firms are willing to employ at a given wage rate. So when we talk about the wage rate, that is the reward for labor. So then we go to the demand curve for labor. For the demand curve for labor, the demand curve for labor is always downward slope. Why is demand curve of labor downward slope? It is downward slope because as soon as the numbers of workers, as soon as the wage rate falls, for example, the wage rate falls from 70 to 50, the number of workers firms will be willing to employ will increase from 30 to 40. So there's always an inverse relationship between the wage rate and the numbers of workers firms are willing to employ. That is why the demand curve is downward slope. Or the other hand, if the wage rate increases from 70 to 100, the demand for labor will reduce from 30 to 20, which means firms will not be willing to employ more workers because it will increase their cost on wages, which will literally increase their cost of production. That is what the demand for labor curve is about. Then, we have other factors that affect the demand for labor. Note, the demand for labor is always derived demand. Why is demand for labor derived demand? Demand for labor is derived demand because as soon as workers are needed, the only time workers are needed is when they are being employed. So firms will not employ an individual to just pay them unless they need to work, they have a job to do. So when we talk about derived for labor, demand for labor is a derived demand. It's a derived demand because workers are only employed if there's a job for them. They're not just going to be employed to be paid to without doing the job. That is why the demand for labor is always a derived demand. So as soon as the demand for workers increases or the demand for goods and services increases, the demand curve for labor will shift rightward from DL1 to DL2. Why? Because the quantity of labor needed, based on the fact that firms have the demand for goods or services has increased, will increase the quantity of labor from QL1 to QL2, bringing about a rightward shift in the demand curve from DL1 to DL2. At that point in time, the wage rate will remain constant. That's for derived for demand, derived for labor, demand for labor. The second one is the availability of substitutes. The substitute for workers are machines or equipment. So if the cost of purchasing equipment or machines are higher than compared to the cost of labor, then the demand for labor will increase, bringing about an increase in the quantity of labor needed from QL1 to QL2, which will bring about a rightward shift in the demand curve of labor from DL1 to DL2. On the other hand, if the cost of employing workers is higher than compared to that of machine, then the demand for labor will reduce because the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded for labor will reduce from QL2 to QL1. And that will bring about a leftward shift in the demand curve from DL2 to DL1. That is about availability of substitute. The third one is productivity of labor. When we talk about productivity of labor, we're talking about the output in respect to the input. If it is expected that employing more workers would increase productivity, then firms will be willing to employ more workers. As a result of that, the quantity of labor needed will increase from QL1 to QL2, bringing about a rightward shift in the demand curve of labor from DL1 to DL2. But if, on the other hand, it is expected that the productivity will reduce, and employing more workers will reduce productivity. As a result of that, firms will reduce the numbers of the quantity of labor needed. Then the demand curve for labor will shift leftward from DL2 to DL1. And the last point is about other employment costs. When we talk about other employment costs, we're talking about the amount related to the cost of recruiting workers. If the amount related to the cost of recruiting or employing workers is higher, then the quantities demanded for labor would reduce, shifting the demand curve for labor leftward from DL2 to DL1. On the other hand, if the cost of employing workers is reduced, it means the quantity of labor needed will increase, shifting the quantity of labor will increase, bringing it from QL1 to QL2, which will bring about an increase in the quantity of, or an increase in the demand curve for labor from DL1 to DL2. So this is all about demand for labor, which is simply what? The quantity of workers firms are willing to employ at a given wage rate. Thank you. Low battery.